pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now, here's your host, Mac Payne.
This is Mac Payne here with episode 1800 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran. This episode is brought to you by the good people out at the Brazos Walking Stick Company in Waco, Texas. They make a product called Legacy Staffs. It is a tremendous work of art. I have a legacy staff, and I treasure it because it is something else. You can go to brazosticks.com and use my name, Mac Payne, one word, in the checkout portion of the website and get a whopping 10% off your next order of the legacy staff or cane of your own design. Don't delay before they're all gone. Go there and get your legacy staff. I guarantee you will appreciate it. In this episode, I'm going to talk to you about the war clouds forming over Southeast Asia. When you are a Vietnam veteran and you look at what's going on over there, you sort of heave a sigh of relief and say, thank goodness I'm too old to go back over there. Because, I hate to say it, we may be heading back over there. This time, it's not a problem with Vietnam, but a problem with China. China is trying to push their way around. And you know how it is with a bully on the playground. Sooner or later, you got to stand up to them and say, enough is enough. I'm going to share with you part of a story that appeared in the Asia Times that addresses this situation. The story is titled, U.S. Move Pits China versus Vietnam in the South China Sea. Subtitle is, Analysts believe China could test U.S. resolve to back tough new rhetoric on sea claims in a warm-up fight with Vietnam. This story was provided by our good buddy David Hutt of the Asian Times. He does a real good job of describing the situation. Let's take a look at what David has to say about it. Dateline, Hong Kong. When U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced that America was ending its neutrality over territorial disputes, pitting China against Southeast Asian states in the South China Sea, Vietnam was put in the precarious middle of a rising superpower contest. Heretofore, Pompeo said, Washington will consider China's claims as completely unlawful and back the rival assertions made by Southeast Asian states, including Vietnam's claim to the oil-rich area surrounding the Vanguard Bank. Over at the podcast website, VietnamVeteranNews.com, in the show notes for episode 1800, you will find an image of Southeast Asia with the location of the Vanguard Bank highlighted. When you look at where it's located, which is almost south of Vietnam, you wonder, how can China claim that area? There's several other nations that are closer to it than China. But you know how it is with a schoolyard bully. They try to push their way around as far as they can. Continuing. The world will not allow Beijing to treat the South China Sea as its maritime empire, Pompeo said. America stands with our Southeast Asian allies and partners in protecting their sovereign rights to offshore resources, consistent with their rights and obligations under international law. A week later, it is not clear how Vietnam views Washington's rhetorical shift. The Foreign Affairs Ministry put out a statement on July the 15th, which did not mention Washington's new position, but did note that Vietnam welcomes countries' positions on the East Sea issues, which are consistent with international law. The statement added that it hopes that countries will try their best to contribute to the maintenance of peace, stability, and cooperation in the East Sea. That's the Vietnam-centric name Hanoi uses in referring to the South China Sea. They call it the East Sea. Vietnam state-run newspapers have also been mostly mum on the U.S. pronouncement, reporting on the facts but offering little analysis or opinion on the strategic shift. Speaking as a Vietnam veteran, I'll guarantee you the Vietnamese are doing backflips of happiness when they heard about that. They got the United States on their side. Continuing. Still, the U.S.'s announcement represents a certain rhetorical victory for Hanoi, as Washington now essentially agrees that China's occupation of certain territory is illegal and invalid. America's new red line could pressure Beijing to rethink its more aggressive actions in the maritime area, which have intensified over the years and in recent months coincided with the COVID-19 pandemic. In the past, Washington said it did not take sides and only sought to uphold international law and free navigation rights, seen in the U.S. Navy's frequent freedom of navigation operations in the area. China views the operations as a violation of its sovereignty. This month, the USS Ronald Reagan and USS Nimitz and 4 other warships sailed to the South China Sea for maneuvers, representing the first dual-carrier operations in the area since 2014. At the same time, Pompeo's speech ratchets up the potential for a U.S.-China clash, in which case Vietnam-claimed territory could become a superpower proxy theater. Beijing has steadily ratcheted up its assertiveness in the South China Sea. Its surveillance and fishing militia vessels spent much of last year sailing near the Vietnam-claimed Vanguard Bank, the site of a joint Vietnamese-Russian exploration for oil and gas. Some writers claim that there is as many petroleum resources in that area as there are in the Middle East. No wonder China wants it. In April, Chinese vessels attacked and sunk a Vietnamese fishing boat, while its surveillance ships have recently returned near the Vanguard Bank. Throughout, Hanoi has at first cried foul and then tried to get China to the negotiation table to calm tensions. We don't know if that's going to work. Continuing, where negotiations have failed, a conflict could spark. The last time China and Vietnam fought, a series of border clashes during the 1980s, started by Beijing's retaliation against Hanoi's move to overthrow China's puppet Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia. Then, war-hardened Vietnam was able to repel China's military advances. Now, however, China's armed forces are incomparably larger, better trained, and better equipped than Vietnam's. I'd still put my money on Vietnam in a war between those two. Derek Grossman, a senior defense analyst at the RAND Corporation, a Washington-based think tank, wrote last year that Vietnam is now probably China's preferred warm-up fight in the South China Sea, given the two sides' military disparity. China is the typical playground bully. They just pick smaller and weaker people they think they can beat up on. Continuing with the story. If Hanoi tried to rebuff China's expansions through force, it would need to do so quickly and in a very small area of the South China Sea, other analysts say. Vietnam's objective, in a conflict scenario, of course, would be to bring China to a negotiating table and maintain the status quo as far as possible, says Bill Hayton, a South China Sea expert at Chatham House, a UK-based think tank. Grossman agrees. telling Asia Times that Vietnam's most reliable option for getting China to back down is to use its Russia-equipped submarines to hit China's surface ships. By giving Beijing a bloody nose through a surprise attack, he said, Hanoi would hope to prevent escalation in conflict. But Nguyen Thi Phong, a research associate at the Center for International Studies, has noted that for Vietnam, the military option is the last line of defense, to be used only when other components of the defense strategy have failed. In other words, he thinks that Vietnam should follow the advice of Stonewall Jackson, notable general in the Civil War, who said, "War is the last option a country should take. However, if it becomes necessary to go to war, you should draw the sword and throw away the scabbard." That's some pretty serious advice, and that's probably what Vietnam would need to do if they decided to go to war against China. Continuing, as such, America's decision to flip its policy on the South China Sea could give Vietnam a new line of defense. America's move conforms to a July 2016 arbitral tribunal ruling at The Hague on a complaint filed by the Philippines against China, which judged the latter's 9-line claim to nearly 90% of the sea to be invalid. There is speculation that Vietnam could file a similar motion against China over their disputed territories. Washington would certainly back any such move in the name of upholding international law, namely the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Seas. There is still a dispute amongst Chinese academics about whether the U.S. is egging on Vietnam or vice versa. China's often jingoistic tabloid Global Times claimed last week that Washington takes advantage of regional countries' claims to sow discord between these countries and China. What else would you expect China to say? Continuing, Beijing would surely react differently if it thinks Hanoi is acting independently or reckons Washington is pulling Vietnam strings. I don't think anybody pulls Vietnam strings myself. Hanoi, for its part, must weigh whether the U.S. would actually come to Vietnam's defense in the event of conflict. Many note the Obama administration failed to intervene on behalf of its Mutual Defense Treaty ally, the Philippines, after China seized control of the contested Scarborough Shoal, which lies within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, in 2012. That's no big surprise that the Obama administration failed to back up the Philippines. Continuing, that history matters as Hanoi weighs up the risk of a limited skirmish with China. The U.S. and Vietnam are not security partners, and Hanoi has no guarantees of U.S. military support, nor is it clear that Vietnam would opt for a U.S. security pledge if it were offered. Vietnam is an extremely confident nation, having fought and won wars against the French, Americans, and Chinese themselves, said Grossman. In a future potential conflict, I think Hanoi would simply hope that Washington provides rhetorical and perhaps some material support. It was widely speculated that U.S.-Vietnam bilateral relations were set to be upgraded to a strategic partnership last year. While not a security pact, upgraded ties would have been a symbolic gesture that also facilitated more U.S. arms sales to Vietnam. Unfortunately, Communist Party chief Nguyen Phu Thuong was forced to cancel his trip to Washington last year, most likely because of ill health after suffering a stroke. The question is now whether he will travel to Washington after the COVID-19 pandemic eases, and if so, what strategic assurances will be on the table. There you have David Hutt's take on the developing clouds of war over Southeast Asia. Speaking as a Vietnam veteran that spent 2 years over there in a war in Vietnam, I sincerely hope and pray that they are able to work things out. We don't want any more wars over there. Even though if there was a war going on against China, more than likely Vietnam would be on our side. Knowing the Vietnamese like I do, I don't think you could ask for a more reliable, tough, strong, and hardcore ally who is going to stay with you through the whole process. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. This is Mac Payne here, closing out episode 1800 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for coming to listen to these stories. You are cordially invited to return again soon and often to listen to more that will be coming your way on this podcast, the Vietnam Veteran News.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?